one thing I did find interesting was the quarterback depth chart for fall has been set with Klubnik being first string, Christopher Vizina being second string, and Trent Pierman being third. There was, we talked about it a lot about how the backup quarterback battle was kind of shaking out and how we felt like that was something that hadn't been decided yet. But it's clear, I guess, right now that they fully plan on Christopher Vizina being the number 2 guy right now. And, obviously fall still has to happen and things can change, but they have a set order right now as far as, behind Cade Klubnik. And that was one thing I wasn't really expecting to hear. Mm-hmm. So what did you think about that? Because I thought that was one of the more.
I thought it was interesting, pretty surprising, to be completely honest. I much like you did not expect for them to come out and name a depth chart immediately when it came to the quarterback position, just because of how the spring game played out, and it seemed like there was some uncertainty with maybe how Chris Vizina was developing and with what Trent Pierman put on display for, albeit just one practice, but the spring game, the only practice that the fans get to see. So obviously it gets hyped up probably a lot more than it should. And Dabo made that clear when he was talking about it, that, that's just one practice in, a long group of practices, right? That was just one day. So they take, obviously they temper the weight that is weighted. Obviously, with fans, we weigh that's the only thing we have. So everything that we say and we talk about is based off of the spring game. We don't get privilege of watching practices. The coaches do, so obviously they weigh it a bit differently than we do. But I really thought it was interesting, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that means that Chris Vizina is ready to truly take those second team reps, and that's, if you're a Clemson fan, that is a good thing. That is what you want to see. He needs to be developing. He needs to be progressing. He needs to be that number 2 guy. That's what Clemson needs him to be right now. He needs to be to the point where he can legitimately be that guy that runs out there should catastrophe strike and Cade Klubnik go down, right? So I think it's a good thing. A little bit surprising, like I said, but overall, hopefully that means that he is developing how we hope that he would when he was originally signed.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, Trent, the thing with Trent Pierman is like, okay, yeah, we talked about the spring game performance and how sharp he looked and how just kind of in control of the offense he was. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like that had come out of nowhere. I think that's one thing that, that was kind of the more surprising thing, because I didn't think the spring game was what, all of a sudden opened the coaching staff or opened our eyes about Trent Pierman. I mean, we had been hearing about Trent Pierman throughout the spring and in rumblings, from last year about, how much of a gamer he is and how poised he is. And like, he was a good football player in high school, a really good football player in high school. So, we had heard about Trent Pierman before and he had gotten praise from the staff before. So it was kind of so it didn't necessarily come. So you had an idea that, okay, there seems to be some legitimate, competition going on there. And I think there is. So, if Trent Pierman is looking good in practice and they still feel like Christopher Vizina is the second guy, that's exactly what you want. As you mentioned, that means that, Christopher Vizina, spring game performance notwithstanding, that he's taken that step in year 2. Because the reality is, and they'll never, the staff will never word it that way, but he wasn't playable last year. And so that it was, if you got in trouble and Cade got hurt, you were kind of in a interesting predicament right, as far as what to do there, because he came in as a raw, like he was all tools basically, and he had a big learning curve. Like he looks the part of a starting and future NFL quarterback, but he just wasn't ready. There was a lot on his plate, and there was a lot that he had to go through to make that transition from high school to college. And so if in year 2 he's made that jump to where they feel like they have a legitimate option at starting quarterback, and he's ahead of the guy that we've all been talking about that looks so poised and in command of the offense, that's where you want it. And obviously you have to trust that the staff is making the correct evaluation there. But that's where Clemson ideally wants to be. Not you don't want to have your former walk-on quarterback, as good of a football player as he is and as smart of a football player is. That's not really where you want to be. You brought in Christopher Rosina to eventually one day be your starting quarterback. And so
right.
That's where you want to be.
Yeah, it's definitely where you want to be, and we're gonna see what kind of growth. Dabo Swinney talked about Cade's growth. Garrett Riley talked about Cade's growth and what he's done this offseason, and really the consensus I got from both of them is the game has slowed down a bit for Cade Klubnik, which is really what you want to see. That's one of Cade's biggest issues is the game was probably too fast. One of the other things that they really talked about that they wanted to see improvement on was him trying to play hero ball, right? Trying to do too much, trying to win the game all on his own. Got to get away from that, right? You got to play within the system. You got to let these other guys that are highly recruited, that are playmakers themselves, help you out, and don't try to do it all yourself. And a lot of that comes from high school, right? You can get away with a lot more of that in high school ball. When you get to this level of college football, not so much. So I think it was good to hear similar sentiments, I guess, from both Dabo Swinney and Garrett Riley when talking about Cade Klubnik and his development and where he is at right now and where they see him progressing this season.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately what's going to drive the success of this team this year and obviously in the coming years. So, you have to the things that you wanted to see based off of what was said in media days are what we've seen. So, but ultimately it's what happens on the field, and we've heard really good things in previous off seasons and previous fall camps about where the team was, and what we got was not that. So I totally understand a Clemson fan being like, all right, I'll believe it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a perfectly valid perspective to take after the last 4 years. So
like I said, approach it with cautious optimism.
Yes.
If you can still muster that optimism up. I know a lot of Clemson fans are jaded from the past 3 seasons about things that have come out and been said, and like you mentioned, did not come to fruition.